Hey, Disneyland Railroad fans, it's me again. I just want to take a quick look at our CK Holiday rebuild so far. Now, I haven't worked on this in a long time, but I just want to show you the progress on it since we last talked about it, which was importing the static model into Unreal. So first, let's take a look at the Blender model, and this is if you recall, this is a fresh rebuild. Nothing was reused from the last model, from the first simulation. So everything has been rebuilt as a native model. Mostly look the same as you saw last time, but the difference is that the valve gear is now linked and moved correctly. So let's animate this, and then we can take a look right down here and see how all this works together. So one of the questions that I guess sometimes is how do we know that something like the model is correct, or if you're familiar with the plans, the CK Holiday plans that I've made, how do we know it's correct? And we know it is correct, mostly correct, because, well, it works. The crosshead and the rockers and the eccentric all work together to create the proper motion. The only thing that's not linked up here is the dog bone here. This is just a model. Now some of this model also is simplified, so there's no nuts and bolts or anything that's actually shown, because in game this will be on the inside under the boiler. But this static model is just a placeholder, but the lifting shaft, what is this called? The link is kind of virtually attached to the lifting shaft. So if I remember where it is in the scene, link gear, lifting shaft. Okay, so the lifting shaft, this end would be connected to a reach rod, which would go back. It runs right under the running board, goes back here to the cab, and connected to the Johnson bar. So when you move the Johnson bar back and forth, you are effectively rotating this lifting shaft, and what it does is that it changes the amount of travel of the rocker. Right now it's in kind of a neutral position, but if we were to push the Johnson bar forward, it would drop. Oops, this way, right? So it would drop like that and effectively change the amount of travel. It's very subtle, but you can see the rocker here. If you look at something like the coupler here, I don't know if it shows up in the video. Okay, and just keep an eye on it as the lifting shafts move, and you can tell that it changes the amount of travel, right? So that changes the amount of steam going into the steam chest, and effectively that's how you throttle the amount of steam into the cylinders. So at the neutral position, there's not going to be a lot of movement, just like idling. But as you rotate the lifting shaft, you can see the effect that it has on the link. The dog bone doesn't actually move at this point, but you can see how the link move along with the lifting shaft, changing essentially the center of the link and how it affects the rocker. And then on the forward axle here, this would be between the firebox. You can see how each pair, the eccentric work in conjunction to make that, well, the eccentric movement of the link. Driven here by the axle, the front axle. Okay, we can slow this down. Let's slow down the rotation. So we're gonna go in at 239. And we're gonna move this to 240. And that, okay. Now it's rotating much slower, so we can really see how everything moves together. So the hope is to make this work in the Unreal Engine, and that is gonna bring us up to the next point of the update here. Be right back. All right, we are back now into the Unreal Engine. So as we saw the model in the Blender, it looks great, but in Unreal, it's not quite there yet. So let's just run it and see where we are as far as the animation go. So don't be alarmed. There's really not much going on for it right now. The drivers rotate, the side rod rotates with it. Nothing else is animated yet. Here's where it gets interesting, because when I took the beautiful Blender model animation and I baked it and I imported to Unreal, and it just does not move the same way. It does not animate the same way as Blender does. It goes all over the place. I don't know why. But yeah, so the animation is being rebuilt from scratch again inside the Unreal, and the way that it is currently animated, for example, the way the side rod's animated is not through physical constraints, but by pure sine and cosine function, which is the same way that the first simulator is done. Also, if you're asking why don't you just copy from the first sim, well, the first sim also kind of cheats in that respect. The link gear doesn't actually move in the first sim. I'm trying to think how much of it's animated. So the outside, what you can see from the side track, is animated. The drivers, the rods, crossheads, the rockers. The eccentrics are not animated. They're static, I guess you see now. The lifting shaft is animated, but the link does not move, essentially. And for this new rebuild, for this new version, I am really hoping to get everything animated correctly, with high fidelity. But at the moment, that just does not seem to be the case. Someone smarter than me could do it. I'm not that smart to do all of this. So right now, it's just kind of sitting here waiting for me to get back into it and try to figure out. So in the first sim, if we just copy it directly, the the side rods and the main rod and the crosshead and the rocker, those all moved. Those are animated by purely sine and cosines, based on the driver rotation, which is pretty smart. I would say, but it also leaves a lot of other items like the eccentric and the link. It's a lot more complicated than just pure sine and cosine functions. So yeah, we could copy that directly from the first sim, but I was really hoping to get something more high fidelity, if we were to make a rebuild of this. Some of these white boxes are just placeholder objects, and don't worry about the axle alignment stuff and all that. That's really trivial. Now you might ask, why don't you just physically rig it with constraints, like I did in the Blender? Well, it's a lot more complicated to rig. In Unreal 5, I don't know if the constraints are accurate enough to rig out the eccentrics and the valve and rods and all that kind of stuff. For example, the crosshead does not just move back and forth. If you ever notice, there's actually a slight incline to the crosshead in the cylinder, about one degree or something. So it doesn't just move back and forth with the driver. It actually, in the world coordinates, it actually moves up and down a little bit. Up higher towards the cylinder and down lower towards the wheels. So that is an interesting, that would be interesting for a computer to to replicate. Like I said, Blender could do it. I don't know if Unreal could do constraints to that kind of detail. It probably can. I just have not get around to it. So that is, or this is the current build of the rebuild. It's also kind of annoying that in Unreal, when things move fast, it gets kind of blurry. So I don't know how the whole thing is gonna look, how it would look if it's done. But it is it's interesting to see something, to see a photorealistic model like the driver and the rod animated like this. Of course, the other side is offset, so if we were to go with a purely mathematical model, each side has its own function. If we, I'll show you what it looks like. So the other thing about rewriting all the or copying over all the functions is that this is a different, Unreal is a different language than Unity, which is what the first sim was built on. So this is just a blueprint to make the drivers rotate and animate the one of the side rod. And as you can see here, it's just sine. And then it would be trivial to get the other side animated too. So once you get one side animated, you just offset the other side by 90 degrees. Right. So that's what it looks like as of today. The Blender model, I think, looks great. The Unreal model is it's a bit behind, I guess, because I could not get it to animate to the level that I really think it deserves. To get this far with all the new model, new texturing, new engine in general, I think if I were to keep doing this, I gotta find a way to make it completely, or as complete as I can, with all the parts moving correctly, because I think we would want to see this in the computer. We would want to be able to control all the link gear and see it work correctly in photorealistic environment. Well, I do have one more update since the last video, and I did start on the tender. So this again back in Blender. Now the tender will not have as much detail as the engine. In fact, that's the same as all the cars. But it still will have more detail than the original model in the first simulator. For example, the frame is actually built out with beams, and the truck actually has leaf spring. Journal boxes actually has pins and bolts. So it won't be in high detail as the engine because it's not the focus, but it will still be more detailed than first simulator. Now the reason that the truck is on the side here is because when we export this to Unreal Engine, it needs to be on the origin where it's going to pivot, and we can see approximately how it's going to go. Oh, one side's completed, and we just mirror this over to the other side. No hassle there. We have a beam front and back. We need to do the pockets and all the fittings and all that good stuff. The hatch, of course, we'll plan on making both hatches operable. The step here has been modeled, we just need to put it in place. So, right, that is the current state. Of course, all this is not to say that there is actually going to be a second version of the same. The CK Holliday rebuild is just something that I kind of tinker with in spare time for now. For now, there's always the first sim. It's still running pretty good. One I do fire it up once in a while just to play around with it, just to get my Disneyland Railroad fix. But maybe someday we'll actually get to our version 2 with a more modern graphical engine and all the bug fixes and all the new feature. I also have my own kind of a wish list that we talked about before. But man, look at the difference though between this version and the rebuild. Just graphically, it's just miles apart. It's just such a big difference that I do hope to see it, the rebuild comes to life, and also for you to explore. But for now, this is Preston. We'll see you back here for another update. Bye.